Good morning, this is Ron Brown. It's Friday morning, May 17th, 2024. Now I'm going to get into the specifics of this series of videos that I'm working on, and today I'm going to talk about structure and direction. Now, always remember, the market is your teacher, and this video series is really trying to help you understand the structure of the market and the direction of the market just by looking at individual price bars. Now I'm going to be working with weekly and daily charts, but these techniques work with all time periods. Okay, once again, any stock index or ETF mentioned in this presentation is not a recommendation to buy or sell. All trading strategies are used at your own risk. If you don't have the PDF file that I'm referring to in these videos, go to www.hgsinvestor.com, context charts, and you can download it and follow along and use it as a reference. If you don't have the software, you should try it. Get 30 days free without a credit card. Just go to highgrowthstock.com. Okay, since I made the last video, I've been at work with the software, adding things that I think are important and just to make it easier to see what's happening, and I'm going to show you that. Here is what I'm going to concentrate on today. I'm going to talk about, the whole thing is about order flow and mechanics, and I'm going to talk about structure and direction today. And I'll get into that in a minute, but before I do that, what I want to do is I want to show you some things that I changed in the last few days. Take control of my cursor again and open this up, and I'll click on the quick pick, and these were in here the other day under trending up and trending down. I've added some warehouse views, and I'm going to explain that right now. So under trending up, we have micro trend up end of day and intraday, and I thought this would be good to give us an idea of how long these trends have been in place. So on every one of these, on the micro, short, intermediate, and intermediate trend with the fan, I've added another view, and it's called the days since the crossover view. So if I click on that, it's using the filter from the views above, and there's no combo rank, so these stay in the same order. For example, if I click on micro trend up end of day or intraday, you can see that wolf speed is at the top. And if I go down to days since the crossover, wolf speed is still at the top, and it tells you how many days have passed since the crossover. Now these other columns here are the days down since the crossover. So only these stocks here have crossed over on the 3 above the 6, but they have not crossed over on the 618 and the 1850. And then I put the fans over here so you can see if the fan is up or down, and you can see there are no stocks here with a positive fan trend to the upside, is what I'm trying to say here. But let's go down here to the bottom. Intermediate trend, fans up. Intermediate trend means that all three of the moving averages have been surpassed, the 3 and the 6, the 6 and the 18, and the 18 and 50, plus the fan is up. So looking at this MicroStrategy, which is closely tied to Bitcoin, it's leading the pack today, and in the past you could see when the crossover was on the 3.6 and the VPOC, but what I've done here with this days since the crossover, MicroStrategy is still at the top, and I can see immediately not only the 3.6 crossover, but the days since the 6 crossed the 18 and the days since the 18 crossed the 50, and if there is a fan uptrend. So just something to enhance the view, to give more insight into how long these trends have been in place. Now I did the same thing with the trending down. I'm not going to show you those right now because I'll be working with those later in the other videos. And then there's just one sitting out here by itself, days since a crossover. It's a little bit different. This can be applied to any folder, and same information, but I've also added the industry, major industry, and the sector, and the number of securities within each of these groups. So if you'll go ahead and update your add-on again, I just put these in this morning. So you'll have to update your add-on again, even if you did it last night. Okay, I'm going to get out of this and move on. Now the folder that I'm currently in, it's in my non-index groups. And if you go down here and look under options, I have the most active stocks from Barchart. It's a file I download from Barchart. I'm a premium member of that, so I could download all this stuff, and I just created groups of both stocks and ETFs. So I am currently in this folder because at some point, and I'm sure, I doubt if it's going to be today, I'm going to start incorporating some options information into stocks that I analyze. I've been promising that. I just haven't gotten around to it yet, but I will. Okay, so I'm just going to use one of these context folders, Microtrend Intraday. I'll begin here, and we're going to talk about, or I'm going to talk about, and hopefully you're going to listen to structure and direction, my interpretation of this. Now I'm just going to grab a stock here which had a high close yesterday. You can see that it crossed over 2 days ago. Zero is always a crossover day, and the volume point of control crossed over 4 days ago. It has a poor relative strength, Kirkpatrick and HGS IRS. It's up today, trading near the top of its range, and it's in infrastructure software. So let's just take a look at it. And well, I'll put this back down here so we can use this over here. So structure and direction. Structure refers to the high and low prices of each interval. Now each interval in this instance is a daily chart. I don't have a weekly chart up here, I have a daily. So the structure, what we're looking for is positive and negative structure. The direction of the candles open to close, it's easy to read because stocks that close lower than their open are black, of course, and stocks that closed higher than their opening price are white. So what I'm trying to do, or what we should be doing, is looking at the structure. We're looking for positive structure, and by positive structure it means that the stock closed, the price closed higher than the open. That's positive structure, the way I interpret it. So all of these are positive. Now as far as the 1 day structure of this candle here, it's a black candle, but it's the third higher, and I'm going to get into that in a later video about price trend changes. So coming off the bottom here, and I'll just mention it briefly, this would be the first higher high compared to this high here. This would be the second higher high because it surpasses this, and this would be the third higher high, which means that that is a price trend change. So the structure is positive here. Back here, the structure was negative. The structure actually refers to the high and low prices of each interval. So even when you have a black candle, here's the high, here's the low, and it's above the prior day. So the structure here is positive even though this is a black candle. When I'm looking for a stock that's bullish, I'm looking for a series of days with higher highs and higher lows. And like I said, even though this is a black candle, it's higher than the prior day, and the low is also. So this would be a price trend change, and I'll get more into that in a later video. So I try to think of it in these terms. If the candle is white, the direction is up for the day or for that bar, which you all know, it's just common sense. If the candle is black, the direction is down, not the direction as we normally think of it, but the relationship of the closing price to the opening price. If you look over here on the left, this is what Frank Bunn states in his video. What I prefer to say is if it's black, the direction is down for the candle, but not necessarily for the day. You can see that right here. But there is a positive structure. This is what I'm referring to right here. Important to understand that structure can have higher highs and higher lows even if the direction close versus open is down, and that's exactly what happens here. What I'm looking for is structural higher highs and higher lows for an uptrend, and you can see that happening right here. I'm going to just get a line here. So coming down here at this point, the direction is down, down, because these are black candles. Here it's up, up, because these are white candles. But the trend has clearly been down. Now, when does it change to an uptrend? Well, using this area right here as the high, this would be the first higher high. This would be the second higher high when this high is taken out. And then this would be the third higher high, which would be a price trend change, even though the direction of this one bar is down. You can see the structural higher highs and higher lows. And then it continues from there. Now I'm going to move over here where this, from what I see on the chart right here, this was breaking out into an uptrend and looks like it was going to go higher. But then the structure changed. Remember, structure refers to the high and low prices of each interval. Here's the high. Get an arrow on here. And here is the low. And the direction also changed. Direction is the relationship of the closing price to the opening price. So what looks so positive on these 2 days, structurally it changed on this one day. Now what happened the next day? Structurally, this is a positive candle. Here's the direction of the closing price to the opening price right here. This is the structure. Here's the high, here's the low. But then the following day, you can see it was a black candle. So the structure, the high and the low, is a negative structure, and the direction is negative too. Now this could be considered both a pivot trend change, with this being the high pivot and the confirmation down here, or it could be a price trend change as the structure went from positive to negative, and this, even though it's a white candle, the structure is considered to be down because there's a lower low and a lower high compared to the prior day's candle. Now here the structure is actually positive even though it's a black candle, because this high is higher than this high and this low is higher than this low, but then it totally collapses. By this time, there had been a price trend change based upon 3 candles, and like I said, I'm going to get into that in a different video. But looking at structure and direction permits us to have a sense of direction of what is happening with the stock, even without indicators. I just really don't use a lot of indicators, or the ones that I should restate that I do use moving averages and volume related indicators, VPA and so on. But you can look at a chart and try to figure out the structure and direction just by doing this. And I'll be doing more of this as I go along. It's confusing. And if you got those Frank Bunn videos, you can listen to his explanation. But when you look at drawings and so on, yeah, there are perfect scenarios. When you start reading charts, it's a little more difficult. But there is structure to it. And there is structure and direction combined, and it can help us determine when a new trend is beginning or when one has ended. Now I want to, I'm going to wipe this clean, and I just want to, here's what I'm looking for. Let's look at it, just walk through this on a contextual chart. No VPA. Okay, now here you can see how VPA can add to this. Not always, it doesn't always help, and there are a lot of signals that are missed, but right up here you can see there is a correct VPA flag to them, an up thrust bar, a sign of weakness. Effort to move up has failed, bearish sign, and that was the beginning of this long downtrend. Now it got down here, and maybe this was an earnings day, probably was. This was a positive direction on this candle. The structure became positive, but then there was a gap down. This was a VPA flag going into earnings, and on this high volume bar, closing on the high indicates strength. It was wrong, or it was negated by earnings. If you look down here, you can see the earnings came out on this day, probably after the bell, and that was a disappointment. And then we start looking for the constructive VPA flags. Here are 2 of them, stopping volume and strength seen returning. Here we see test, low volume test, and stopping volume. Look how the volume dropped off here after this one. Now this was a constructive candle here, and so was this one, but they're caught in this area here. We have no well-defined structure. Now the next day there was a negative, a pseudo upthrust. It opened here, traded up, couldn't go anywhere, and closed near the low, so that generated another VPA flag. This is negative structure, this is negative structure, and then we started seeing some positive structure. On this candle right here, it opened here, traded up here, so there was some buying, but by the end of the day, there was profit taking. But this is where both the structure and the direction began to change. Okay, let's go down to the next one. I'm going to add the 3, 6, and 18. See if this gives us any assistance. You can see there was a fake out here on the 3-6 crossover before the earnings. This is why it's always so risky going into earnings. But let's go back up here. I'm going to put the crosshair on right here where this structure started to break down. And here is your 3-6 crossover to the downside, I believe. No, not yet. 1 day more. But the volume point of control had already turned negative. Let's look at the rest of this. You can see that the group was going down. this stock was slightly outperforming the group. It was moving up, but the group was going down, and as the group went down, the stock went down too. So this is all context. And the 6 stayed below the 3 all the way down here. Like this was a fake out too on the cross. But when the 3 and the 6 are below the 18, more than likely you're going to have just a counter trend move up, and that's exactly what happened. When we start incorporating the charts here, the context charts, and start looking at individual candles based upon structure and direction, we can take everything into consideration. Like at this point right here, would this be a buy on the 3-6? Well, you'd have to figure, are there 3 higher highs? No, there's only 2 higher highs on those candles. So that's, I'm trying to think in these terms all the time, using just plain charts and then also putting context into it. Now let's go down to the next context with no VPA flags, and you can see that the 18 versus the 6 has been negative for a long time, and the 18 versus the 50 was negative. So whenever you're taking these trades, just realize that if everything's going against you as far as context, these can just be counter trend trades, or maybe I should say. And then here's support and resistance, which are drawn in from the zigzag indicator. And then the weekly charts. What's the weekly chart saying? Weekly chart is still in a downtrend based upon both structure and the lack of a confirmed pivot. Now, confirmed pivots are something I'm going to get into in a different video. Okay, that's a brief explanation. I'll elaborate on all this as we go forward, covering pivot trends, price action trend changes, and then we'll get into order flow and market sentiment. But these are key to determining trends and when we should either buy or sell a stock based upon this information. It can be very confusing, no question about it, but it can also be very helpful. Well, I've got this weekly chart up here. Let's go back to this point here. Now, you can see that this was a negative structure, and direction was negative also. And then we started seeing some buying on this one, on this weekly chart. So if I'm looking for a price trend change, I'm looking for 3 higher highs. Here's the first higher high right here. This would be the second higher high. And even though this chart the structure is negative, this is the third higher high here. 1, 2, 3, because the high was above this line. And then it pulled back for 1 week. But the price trend change had begun. Now this here, and I'll explain all this later, this star, this pullback here, this is a low pivot after the price trend change. So when this area, this high is taken out on the weekly chart, this confirmed bar here, this would be a pivot trend change, a confirmed pivot. It's not the low pivot, it's confirmed because it pulled back and then went again. And I'll get into all that in these other videos. I hope all this makes sense. If it doesn't, I will do more and more of this, and you'll understand it as we go along. Thank you for listening.